I'm Andrea, a passionate DEI advocate and consultant on a mission. Join me in each episode as we celebrate diversity, ignite conversations, and craft workplaces and educational institutions where everyone thrives. This podcast is my commitment to making a meaningful impact on the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So are you ready? Let's get Diversifused. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Get Diversifuse podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Horton-Mericli, founder of Diversifuse Consulting and a passionate DEI advocate and ally. In today's episode, we will discuss the lack of care in allyship, navigating biases with compassion, awareness, respect, and empathy, with our guest speaker, Jennifer Boudrye. Jennifer is the founder of Queer Allyship and empowers individuals to gain a deep awareness of LGBTQ plus identities, fosters transformative mindset shifts, and guides them to becoming affirming allies. She is the mom to 3 adults, one of whom is bi, and the bonus mom to a trans man. She has 20 plus years as an educator and librarian, and has several years as a certified parent coach and training manager. So welcome, Jennifer, to the Get Diversifuse podcast. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you came to found Queer Allyship?
Sure. So I always try to make this as short as I can, but I have a very circuitous path. And I will just start with, I had 17 plus years as a school librarian. I worked everything from pre-K through 12th. I worked public, I worked private. And 4 of those years, I was the director of library programs for DC Public Schools. So I have done a lot of professional development and training. And I just got to a point where I needed the next chapter. And so I kept thinking about all of the things that I dealt with as a parent of 3 children. Mine are grown and flown at this point, and yay me. And looking at, all of the years working with students and realizing that parents need more support, right? We all do. None of us know what we're doing until we're doing it.
Yeah.
So I went and got the certification as a parent coach, started working. I was focusing mostly on teens, and then realizing that more and more of my life was focusing on LGBTQ plus advocacy. So I was the training manager for an LGBTQ plus advocacy nonprofit in Virginia when I lived there, and started working with more and more organizations, government, agencies, and doing some training. So I really decided to shift and focus to specifically working with people who are allies, friends, family members of LGBTQ plus folks. And then I moved to Ohio in April of 2024 and decided to rebrand very recently. Decided to rebrand as Queer Allyship so that it really is a more encompassing title. So I call myself a Queer Allyship facilitator. I still work a lot with parents. I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, but I also do training and workshops and speaking with organizations and groups.
Nice. And that is, and I hate to say it, that it's sorely needed during these times. Everything with diversity and inclusion is, we're seeing backlashes everywhere. So your work is very, very, very important. So thank you for founding Queer Allyship and being an ally to our LGBTQ plus friends and family members, because just the world news in general is kind of very diminishing. So
scary.
It is scary. And, but I'm hopeful that things are going to get better, and DEI and allyship is not dying. People like us, we need to keep showing up and keep being that ally and advocator for our friends. So and us, because we are, as you know, we have many identities in one individual. So intersectional identities, and so we just got to keep showing up and doing the work. And I'm hopeful and positive that it's going to see an upturn.
Yeah. And this is where, I look at, and this is why I work with the adults, because the kids, for the most part, are good to go with understanding about identity. queer identity specifically, but they're, there's still the adults that work with them and parent them that still have questions.
Yeah, because we individuals, people from our generation and above, we didn't grow up with the internet. We didn't grow up with the global connections, the ease of global connections that the youth of today have. And so the scope that we grew up with is very limited just to what our family members and friends would say, to what the media and news at the time, which if you're my age or older, was pre-cable. So our choices of stations were very limited. And so we grew up in that time. And so a lot of us are of our generation and above are very, not that we're resistant, it's just we're uninformed. And people who are uninformed get uncomfortable with when it comes to things that they don't know. And they make assumptions, and often they're negative and they're wrong assumptions, incorrect assumptions. And so, and so I'm right there with you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think in addition to the visibility and the understanding, the access to information, it is about change in language, right? And the evolving language that people are finding more and more descriptors for themselves. And so we've got to catch up and keep up with the language. And certainly in the media, having a lot more visibility. And, I tell people when I started as a school librarian, there were few, if any, books that had queer characters. When I left my last school in 2023, I could barely buy a book without having at least one queer character. And so the publishing industry responds to what is happening in the world. So that's just one indicator that visibility is a little more accessible to a lot more people.
I agree. I tabled at the last at a Pride event in June, and and it was a lot of community resources. And one of the community resources, I cannot believe I had not heard of it. It was a local resource in Pittsburgh, PA, and it's this small little bookstore that is all about intersectional identities. And they brought all their books, from little kids books all the way to adult books, on LGBTQ plus identities. But they said that they also have a lot of different BIPOC and religion and all books about just the colorfulness of our planet and the human race. And I was just gobsmacked. I was like, I could not believe I had not heard of this place. It is amazing.
But you did find it. And I will send you a resource to include in the show notes. We Need Diverse Books is a great resource for folks who are looking for books that are diverse, for diverse audiences, diverse voices, characters. So books is always a great place to start.
It is. And I will also, I can't remember the name of the bookstore off the top of my head, but I will also put the bookstore I was talking about, listeners, in our summary as well. So I'm sure they have an online presence as well. So Jennifer, can you describe the process of recognizing and overcoming intrinsic biases and what they look like on a practical level?
Yeah. So there are so many different kinds of bias, right? And I think there's more than 20 that folks are, that if we go through and look at all the different kinds of biases. So I tend to loop them all together as intrinsic bias, because to me, that is the biases that we hold, that we have grown up with, right? And that's okay, because we're human beings and we live and exist in a society, and they are so ingrained in us. And when it comes to queer identity, our norm in this world is heterosexual, cisgender, which means born the same body and gender identity. And that just gets locked in, right? And I this is where I usually tell the story. I have, my bonus son is married to a cisgender woman, and they're now expecting their second child.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yes, their first, I recall very vividly, they came back the first time, they had the sonogram, and it's a boy. My immediate response was, because as a transgender man, I said, you of all people know that it has a penis. that if the child may or may not identify as male, right?
That's
So even
true.
as a transgender man, it is, we
Ingrained.
look at, the biology and we automatically make the assumption. And so it's that basic. And it's but in the language that we use. I worked at an all-girls school and would say very easily, all right, ladies, time to go. Oh, we've got 8 students who don't identify as female. Okay, students. And so it is understanding that there are differences in all aspects of identity and thinking about where we got the ideas that we got, right? And so when I work with folks, I hold no judgment. Everybody is coming to this conversation at a different place with different backgrounds, with different information, different misunderstandings. And so it's really about stopping and saying, so, tell me, how did you get to that belief, right? Did you meet someone? Did you read something? Are you in a church family that has, a house of worship that is, giving you doctrine? And
well,
then
actually,
really just
even the church
analyzing it.
family, it's not always church, it's synagogue or temple.
That's house of worship, right? And so whatever your faith background is, that's going to play into it. And just recognizing, I've been doing DEI work for quite a long time. And I walk into every conversation with the very clear awareness that I am a white presenting female, cisgender, heterosexual, divorced, and it goes on and on. So I know my identity, and I don't know anyone else's. So I can't make any assumptions about what other people know or believe. And so I want to get curious and find out what it is that they believe. So then, if there's some information that I can provide that is tweaking or changing a mindset, that's my job.
That's awesome. And it's very important for everybody to go in when they meet somebody for the first time, or a group of people for the first time, whether you're a teacher and you're meeting your students on the first day of school, or you're a boss and you just had a new hire, whatever the situation may be, to start with a blank slate. Don't listen to what other people have told you with their opinions and everything, because that's their biases and their perceived experience with that individual, or assumed, assumptions based on what they may have heard or read about that individual. And just to go back, when I was a teacher, because I was an educator too and loved it. So I taught special ed in middle school, loved it. Middle school gets a bad rap, but I loved it.
I was a middle school librarian for 5 years. Awesome. Love them.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. And, but I would often hear stories about students that were on my roster for the new year. And I was like, you know what? They're kids, they're people, they have lives, they have their experiences that they've experienced. I'm not going to judge them and go in with preconceptions of who they are and how they're going to behave and my expectations of them when it comes to learning and behavior. So everybody started with a blank slate in my class. And even then, it's like people, life happens when they're coming to school, and you don't know what they experienced on their way to school on one certain day. So they may have not been their best selves. So it's really having that active listening and that non-judgmental approach to everyday interactions with individuals, no matter who they are, what age they are, what the location or situation might be. And so, those implicit biases and those negative assumptions can really turn a not bad situation into a bad situation if you act on them. So it's very important for us to self-assess ourselves and all. And so you had mentioned something with assessing, and I love that, because that is probably the hardest thing for people to do, is to self-assess, because we don't like to. I mean, we're our worst critics, but we're also we don't like to see things on paper that criticize us, or hear other people criticizing us, even though we're our worst critics. So it's stepping out of that comfort zone. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And just being willing to understand that there are different perspectives, right? And different lives and different identities and things that's what makes it, the world an amazing place.
Yep. It's the spice of life.
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain how the C.A.R.E framework can be applied to everyday interactions to support LGBTQ plus individuals?
Sure. So I came up with, acronyms are always a fun way to present information, right? So when I started parenting and taking parenting courses, we talk a lot about empathy and compassion. Mm-hmm. And I sort of wrestled with what is the difference between those two things? And in talking with my children, they let me know that I lived in a place of compassion a lot. Okay. So compassion to me, the way I define it is compassion is that feeling that makes you want to take action, right? I sense something is happening. And as a parent, oftentimes we want to fix, we want to provide our perspective.
Yes.
Okay. So
whether it's wanted or not.
Exactly. So compassion inspires action. That's a starting place.
Okay.
Awareness is getting that place, is that time where you are going to look at your own intrinsic bias, your own filter of what it is you think is needed, mm-hmm. and really look at the person, right? Get to understand their identity, what they're going through. Not to necessarily understand it, because you're never going to understand it because it's not your lived experience, right? And then you get to a place of respecting. So awareness really brings that clarity of who that person is and what the situation is. Respecting people is really believing who they tell you that they are. It is adding validity to their lived experience and believing, truly believing. And this comes into play often when we have, especially adolescents, that will switch identities, right? Mm-hmm. And it is sometimes whiplash for parents. And it's a time of exploration for those kiddos. So I always say, you have to believe who your child tells you that they are in this moment. Okay. Then we can get into empathy, and it really is a cycle. It goes around and around and around. And empathy, again, is a place that really fosters connection. It is, rather than compassion, which is, I want to do, empathy is not an action. Empathy is, I'm going to sit with you. I don't understand what you are experiencing, but I'm here for you. And I'm going to give you that space, and I'm going to provide you what you tell me that you need, which then takes us back to the compassion. So as a parent, I thought I was being empathetic. Mm-hmm. It wasn't. I was being compassionate. I lived in that place a lot, too often. And so it's a learning experience to be able to really, step back and say, mm-hmm. You as a child, or you as the queer person, you're in charge of this journey. I'm on a path with you. My path is going to diverge. We're going to connect. We're going to cross over. But this one's yours.
Nice. I really like that, because there is a lot of, one, it sounds like it's a very non-judgmental approach, which I love. And it's a supportive approach to help to just go along with your child on the journey, or your friend if it's not a child, or whatever family member, whoever it may be, and just going along with them and supporting them as needed on the journey in a non-judgmental approach. Because as you said, it's their exploration. They need to figure things out. They need to find who they are. This is their journey to find their true self.
Sure. And it's also a matter of understanding that coming out is not a one and done process, okay, or one and done event. Someone who is sharing their queer identity, when and if they choose to come out, they're going to be coming out over and over and over again throughout their lives. And so when we talk about equity and support within the workplace, it mm-hmm. is, learning that someone, whether it's a colleague or someone that you're managing, is coming out with a queer identity, it's the same process, right? I want to help and fix things for you, but it's not mine to fix. How can I, help me understand who you are, what you want others to know or not know, and how do I help you through that process?
I love that. Because when it comes to the workplace, they will need an ally in the workplace. They may have allies outside the workplace, but they need at least one or more in the workplace, because most of the time, people are at work most of the time, and and you don't want to feel alone. You don't want to feel judged. You don't want to feel like you're an outsider or not included, and that you can't be your authentic self. And so having those allies in the workplace is so important. And as a supervisor, as a leader, it's important to not really just get to know your team, but just be there for them and support them in whatever journey they may be going through. And it could be as simple as just making sure to use the proper pronouns that they would like to be addressed by. And just kindly and respectfully correcting other team members who may accidentally use the improper pronouns. It could be that simple.
And I look at, I tell people my perspective of being an ally is it's my job to stand in front and take the arrows, help to educate, and then step aside and hand the mic. Right. Yes. And so that's, one thing I think for allies, the more that you know, and the more that you understand, you can help to, educate others so that the folks, queer folks shouldn't have to be educating the world about who they are.
Exactly. And they don't speak for all other queer folks. They're themselves. They're an individual.
Exactly.
So, everybody's journey is different.
For sure.
So cool. So with that, how can allies navigate difficult conversations about bias and privilege, especially within their own communities or families or in the workplace?
Yeah. First, you have to be willing to have them, right? You have to know when it's appropriate to engage. I have family members that I don't have this conversation with because it's going to take too much energy from me. And they're not people that interact with my kids or with my family, so that it's not going to be of consequence, right? Other family members that there is more of an interaction with, my father, who has passed, was not on the same political leanings that I am. And at first it was hard, right? And then, when my son came out as bi, but he got to understand it, right? Because he loves his grandson. And we were able to have those conversations. And it was important, right? And anytime you're having any one of these conversations, it is, again, coming from a place of curiosity, understanding where the lack of knowledge and information is, understanding where the biases are coming from, and then helping people to get to a place where they can see that they have a choice to make. They can either shift their perspectives, right, and become affirming allies, or they can risk losing that person from their lives. And I've had some of those conversations. Yeah. And it's tough, but it's the queer person does not have a choice about who they are. People who are allies have a choice to be allies or not.
I agree. So this, as you were speaking, a question popped in my head, because I don't get this question a lot, but sometimes, I do get it every now and then. So sometimes people say, and this isn't as I said, one of the questions I sent you, but if you could give me your perspective on this, I would greatly appreciate it. Sometimes people state that, well, why are all these people coming out now? It's a fad that's going on. They're not really like that, or they just want to jump on board and be part of the team, with the in crowd. So and that to me comes from a lack of awareness and understanding. How do you address individuals who may be thinking it's some kind of fad that everybody's just jumping on?
Yeah, I get a lot. So it is a question that I am used to having to answer. So it definitely comes down to visibility, right? There are queer people in television shows and in books and on commercials everywhere.
Yeah.
That weren't, in as great number as they, as I was growing up. Language is developing and expanding. And so we are finding more opportunity for people to have different words to describe themselves. And we know a lot more. We have a lot more awareness about human development. And so, I will often take people through the whole, basically LGBTQ 101, if I need to help them understand there's a difference between gender identity and gender expression. Mm-hmm. And those two things are very different and separate from sexual orientation. And people can be a combination of all the things. And so I will use the term queer instead, hence queer allyship, rather than LGBTQ plus for a couple of reasons. One, LGBTQ plus is really hard for me to say over and over and over again. And two, when I look at just the tremendous variety of identities and expressions, some of them, I don't want them all to be under plus, right? I want to have one word to describe all of the shades of all of the colors under the rainbow. And so queer to me is a more descriptive or more inclusive term than LGBTQ plus. But it really is. And so what I will end up asking people is, and I will ask you, Andrea, are you left-handed or right-handed?
I am right-handed, but I do find that I use my left hand a lot of times, but like when I'm eating and grabbing things, but I'm right-handed. And I don't know if I was right-handed, if I'm ambidextrous or if I was originally left-handed and taught with my right hand. I don't know.
Yeah. So but you have an inherent sense. You answered immediately, right? You know yourself to be right-handed.
Yeah.
You have some question about whether or not you're ambidextrous.
Yeah. Because I keep using my left hand for things.
Yeah. So identity is very much the same thing, right? It is an inherent sense of who you are. And, I have a daughter who similarly we think was probably left-handed, but she was probably taught to be right-handed. And again, there is a lot of research and a lot of evidence that children know their gender identity by age 3. But society is teaching, as we talked about earlier, a binary, male, female. Kids know their sexual orientation by around puberty. And there's a lot of messaging throughout our lives. And so this is where you're also seeing a lot of older people. I have a good friend who did not begin her transition until she was 55. Wow. Right? Who are recognizing my bonus son started his transition at 26 and he's now 35. So people are realizing that there are options, right? They're able to say, oh, this is a thing that I have always felt something about, and this feels right. And so now they have the opportunity.
That is a great answer. Thank you.
A long one. Sorry.
Sometimes great answers are long answers, but it was a nice, thorough answer. So thank you so much. And as you were talking about older people, or people who are in not the young, like Generation Z or millennials, finally being able to come out and express themselves as they feel that they should be expressing themselves. It made me remember, and this is just a side story. I was in a store last year, and there was a trans woman working in a ladies' store, a dress store for business professionals, and she was older. She looked like she was probably in her 50s, but noticeably still going through the transition. And so that when you're speaking, it reminded me of that. It's like, yeah. And it's almost, when it comes to, if you want to make the comparison to certain neurodiverse and diagnoses, that a lot of the studies were done on white males. Yeah. And so females and people of color tended to get misdiagnosed a lot, and for more severe type of diagnoses than, being on the autistic spectrum or having ADHD, and instead of getting diagnosed as, they're manic depressive, which is not an appropriate term these days, but that's what they were getting some of the diagnoses that were coming out, or schizophrenic or things like that. And it was just, there was just no studies done on them. So a lot of people are in 40 and above are finally getting the correct diagnoses, because other studies have been done on other people who identify as other types, outside of white male.
Yeah. So it truly, it's the more we know, right? And this is where, going back to children, and we talk a lot about gender affirming care, and there are a lot of misunderstandings about what that means. But specifically around puberty blockers, it's an amazing, the understanding that puberty blockers are literally just a pause button. Okay. So it is, you're not going to go through, a traditional puberty based on the sex you're assigned at birth. We're going to wait. And the reason that's so important, for many, many reasons, but one of the aspects is when you have gone through puberty, right, you physically are changing.
Yeah.
And so there's the possibility of greater dysmorphia, of not aligning with your gender identity if you've already gone through puberty. Like the woman that you saw had gone through male puberty, and it's going to be more challenging for her to become feminized to the maybe for the to the level that she would like to. So that is, it's again the misnomer of what gender affirming care is, and knowing that those the drugs that are being utilized have been utilized for decades and decades on girls who had precocious puberty, right, and who were starting to menstruate at a very early ages. So there's a lot of learning, a lot of clarity that we need to get so that people can understand what all of this actually means. And the goal always is to have people be healthy and happy. Right. Yes. And so the statistics that I could quote you around, mental health challenges, when kids and even adults are not affirmed and not, don't have allies. That's why I do this work, because we need more and more people to understand.
Yeah, because we all hear the horror stories of somebody taking their lives because of not being able to, or not being accepted, not having the allies, not having the support that they need through this journey of finding themselves. And so having allies is so important. So thank you so much for the work you do. It is very important.
Well, thank you for helping me let more people know about it.
Oh, of course. So let's go to our next question. And we kind of touched a little bit on it already, but what role does intersectionality play in allyship, and how can allies ensure they are supporting all aspects of a person's identity?
Sure. So from a, the negative perspective, right? We just touched on a little bit about the mental health challenges and the frustration when there is not the allies and the support, right? And so when I look at LGBTQ plus, right? And then it's LGBTQ plus or IA plus. The A used to stand for ally. The A is not stand for ally. It stands for asexual, aromantic, agender, right? And the reason is that all of the letters in the acronym or in the descriptor are marginalized identities, and allies are not marginalized. We're part of the majority. Okay. So when you looked at all of the impact of a marginalized identity, and then you have additional marginalized identities stacked up, you have greater risk for discrimination, for prejudice, for mental health challenges. And so it becomes a larger burden to carry. And so it is, again, it goes back to, what we call the rainbow rule is don't assume what you don't know. Right? Look at each individual and discover who that person is in all aspects of their identity. And that to me is the start of allyship, is getting to know the individual that's sitting in front of me.
I couldn't agree more. Like asking questions out of curiosity, or just because you don't know something, ask questions because it's so important. I would rather be asked something that somebody might feel like is rude to ask than making a negative, incorrect assumption about me.
Yeah.
And that goes with anybody. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I say again, it's as a cisgender heterosexual ally, oftentimes people are more comfortable asking me those questions, right? Because they don't want to offend.
Yeah.
And so, pretty much nothing you can say or ask is ever going to offend me. I might disagree with you vehemently, but
and that's okay.
If you're coming to the conversation with true openness and willingness to have the conversation, then the intent is great. And so it is a matter of being willing to learn.
Agree. Because we cannot just assume something about anybody, because we can never walk in that person's shoes. We will never walk in that person's shoes. And so having those uncomfortable conversations is very, very important. Hopefully, like if it's in a group environment, it's facilitated, but if it's one-on-one, just ask the question and apologize if it offends, but just ask out of curiosity.
And even, I think it's stating your intent up front,
exactly,
right?
Yes.
To say like, this might be a really awkward question, but I'm wondering, and if you don't want to tell me, that's fine. Yeah. You don't want to answer it, right? Respecting that you're not owed every bit of information.
Exactly. I love how you approach that. Yeah. It's asking respectfully and non-judgmentally, and making sure that they know that it's okay not to answer. Just say, I don't feel comfortable answering that question. And it's like, okay, then drop it. So what are some common, with that, this is a great transition into our last question. What are some common pitfalls or mistakes allies make, and how can they avoid them while staying committed to growth?
Yeah. So I think one of the most common ones that happens now, it comes down to pronoun use, right?
Oh, yes.
And there is, first of all, people say, oh, they is not a singular pronoun. No one can be they.
It's grammatically correct.
We use it all the time, right? I'm looking out the window. Oh, I see someone over there with a balloon. Wonder what they're doing. I just use they because I don't know who that person is. So let's get over that. It's just, you don't get to use that excuse anymore, right? Or it's, I've known this person as this name and pronoun, and now they're this, and I just can't make the switch. And if that person was switching to a married name, would you be able to do it?
Exactly.
Right. And so it's a matter of will. I'll give you grace for a minute, right? But then it is understanding that you are a human being and you are going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
We are all going to make mistakes. So the way that you manage that is, if I refer to you as he, I'm sorry, I mean she, and you keep it rolling. And then, right, so you quickly apologize, correct yourself, go and practice another time. And recognize that it is yours to change, right? And if I were to say, stop and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I feel so bad. Okay, I just made it about me. And I'm asking you to make me feel better. And I'm the one that hurt you, right? I did the harm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about me.
It's true.
It's about the person that I just misgendered or misnamed, and keep that going, right? With a lot of kids, the immediate response is, are you sure? Right? Mm-hmm. And that is not an okay response. Right? I tell parents there are 3 things that you need to say if your child comes out to you. 1, thank you for trusting me with this information. I guarantee you that child has been thinking about it and agonizing about whether or not to tell you.
And was scared.
Scared. Even if they think that you are the most open, welcoming person in the world, still a hard thing to say. Yes. So thank you. 2nd, I love you. Full stop. If you add no matter what, that means that the thing that you just told me, I'm going to have to get over that in order to love you. The 3rd thing, and this is applicable, the 1st and the 3rd are applicable to everyone, regardless of your relationship. What do you need from me right now so that you feel supported? And that's it. And then let the child or the person, lead you on that path, on your path, on their journey. And, there are some other little things like I think if it's a school situation or a work situation, it's appropriate to ask, do others know? Or is this information that I am to keep private?
Okay. That's a good point. Very good point. Wow. I love it never dawned on me that the no matter what could be, it is a negative, I wouldn't say connotation, but it's a negative phrase. And so it just sort of negates what you said. And it never dawned on me. And so that is very insightful, and I appreciate that. But it's wow. Yeah. But when it comes to I'm glad that you mentioned the pronouns are the hardest. And for it's my experience that as long as the effort's there and you keep trying, and as you said, you don't apologize, oh my gosh, I'm so, to make it about you. As long as you keep trying and you correct yourself, and when you make a mistake, because as you said, we're all humans, we make mistakes, it's okay, and you just move on, then that's going to be so appreciated by the individual who has asked you to address them by whatever pronouns they asked you to address them by, because it's then just making a mistake and not correcting yourself, or not even trying. So it's and that lets them know that, oh, this is a safe space. This is a safe environment. I feel supported here, and they can continue to bring their authentic selves to work, to school, at home, and be their authentic selves at home, wherever it may be. And so, I'm glad that you mentioned the comments.
Yeah, if we all start using more gender neutral language, right? Yeah, it becomes easier. Again, as an educator, it's, hey, students, all right, yes, hey, scholars, or y'all, friends, whatever you need, right? And so just, I love to ask people to start paying attention to how gendered our world is.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And I was at a PFLAG, which is an amazing organization. I was at their national convention, and they had covered this bathrooms with signs that this was so brilliant. One sign said, this bathroom has stalls. The other sign said, this bathroom has stalls and urinals. There was no indication of what gender should go where, or any gender. It was, this is the equipment that you will find. Pick what you need.
I like that. I like that. And when you said how gendered our language is, before we started today, I told you my husband's Turkish, and in Turkish, they don't have genders. Everything's o, like it. There is no, like Spanish. The female terms end in an a, the male terms end in an o. Everything's gender. The language is gender neutral, and it is. And I just thought of that right now. It's very interesting that, I mean, I'm sure there's other languages like that as well, but I think English and other languages in Spanish and the Romance languages need to start jumping on board with that. Yeah, it's going to change the dictionary.
Language evolves all the time. That's why they have to keep publishing the dictionary.
It keeps getting thicker and thicker.
Yes.
But yeah, it would be so much better if it was gender neutral. And so I am in human resources in my day job, and I do sourcing. And I tell my candidates, when it comes to writing a cover letter, keep everything gender neutral. Dear hiring manager or dear recruiter, don't put, don't use Mr. or Miss, because one, you don't know who the hiring manager is, and you don't know how they identify. So everything needs to be gender neutral, and it just shows that you're respecting whoever's on the other end, because, and oftentimes more than one person reads it.
And it makes an impact. So I was staying at a hotel in New York, and afterward got, a thank you letter from, it's pretty standard, but it was addressed to MX Boudrye, and MX is the gender neutral rather than Ms., Mr., Mrs., right? Yeah. So it's MX, and my name, Jennifer Boudrye. Jennifer's a pretty traditionally female name, feminine name. And so they could have made an assumption, but I'm sure it was a form letter anyway, so it didn't matter. But I just really appreciated that. And I think this is the other piece there is so much research and evidence that shows that when organizations and companies are affirming, it improves retention, recruitment, customer satisfaction of queer people and straight people, right? So it is just across the board a positive.
Exactly. And with, on the recruitment side, you can recruit a lot more diverse candidates, because the younger generations, I would say they're all about it, but it's very important to a lot of them, the DEI aspect of workplaces, the sense of belonging and an inclusion that and in these initiatives that workplaces have or don't have, it's important to them. So those that have them are going to get more applicants, more qualified, more diverse applicants. And with diversity comes a lot more innovation and a lot more reflection of who that organization serves, especially if they're global, and so, I mean, it's just a win-win all over. So cool.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being our guest today. Let's go into some key takeaways. Well, before we go into key takeaways, is there anything else you'd like to say about the C.A.R.E framework?
I think I'll leave it there.
Okay, sounds good.
Leave it there. There's a lot I can say, but we're this will be going on for days.
Oh, I know. I could talk about this stuff forever
and ever. So we'll leave the C.A.R.E framework right there.
All right, sounds good. Okay, listeners, let's go into some key takeaways then. So Jennifer and I talked about understanding intrinsic bias. We talked about recognizing and confronting your own biases as a crucial first step toward becoming an effective ally. Awareness is key to fostering genuine empathy and respect for queer identities. We talked about the C.A.R.E framework, and we learned how compassion, awareness, respect, and empathy, C.A.R.E, can guide your journey toward allyship, helping you build meaningful and supportive relationships with the marginalized communities. We talked about transformative mindset shifts and discovered how shifting your mindset can lead to more inclusive behaviors and practices, both personally and professionally. We talked about empowering others and the role allyship has in empowering queer individuals by creating safe and affirming environments, whether at home, in the workplace, or within the community. And we talked about actionable steps for allyship. And we gained some practical strategies for being a proactive ally, including continuous learning, listening, and supporting queer voices. Any other key takeaways you can think of, Jennifer, that I may have missed?
I think you got a lot there. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Okay, so I always like to end towards the end to talk about some next steps for our listeners so they can continue their educational journey and continuous learning. So some next steps, I cannot speak today. Some next steps for you listeners. So self-reflection, encourage yourself to reflect on your own biases and how you can begin to address using the C.A.R.E framework. Educate yourself. So I'm going to put some resources. Jennifer will send me some as well, so you can continue learning about queer identities and allyship. And some of the resources will be things like books, podcasts, and online courses. Get involved in your community. Join or support queer organizations and initiatives in your communities. I cannot talk to you. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry, listeners and Jennifer.
Fine.
Practice active allyship. So we're going to recommend that some things so you can do to practice your active allyship by speaking up against discrimination, advocating for inclusive policies, and supporting queer individuals in your lives. And again, just continuous learning. It's very important to have ongoing education and self-improvement in becoming a more effective ally. So again, Jennifer and I will be putting some resources in the summary of today's podcast, and I will also have some resources for y'all on one of the last slides of our podcast today. Do you have any other next steps for listeners, Jennifer?
I think it's an understanding that allyship is an active verb and it is all year round.
Love it. Okay. And if any of our listeners want to get a hold of you, Jennifer, to be a speaker at one of their events or on their podcast, or if they want to get connected to Queer Allyship, how can they contact you?
So the easiest way is to go to my website, which is Queer Allyship, all one word put together, .com. And I'm also on Instagram at queer_allyship and Facebook. And I also want to mention that I also run I call it a product, but it's a resource directory called Queer Camp Fair, which is an online directory of all of the queer affirming camps in North America. So I know we're at the end of camp season and kids are going back to school, but that's a resource that you can find on my website. Yes. And I actually have the timing of this podcast is perfect. I am running a free 1-hour allyship workshop on August 17th and again on August 20th. So that information will be on the website as well. It'll have a little bit of a back to school flavor, but I'll probably do it again with, as we get closer to the holidays, because that's going to be another time when it's important to ally up, as I say.
I agree. Yeah, the holidays are a very difficult time for many people from marginalized communities, especially our queer friends. And so awesome. So listeners, I will have all that information that Jennifer just gave us, how you can contact her on one of the last slides for our podcast. So you can either fast forward to it, or you can also look in the summary of today's podcast. So thank you so much for being our guest, Jennifer. It was wonderful speaking with you, as I said, and you said we could talk about this forever, but we know time is limiting. So yes, just thank you. And listeners, remember our podcasts drop every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So stay tuned for our next episode. And with that, I will let you guys go. Remember, stay diversifused. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
To be a guest speaker on the Get Diversifuse podcast, I'm on the lookout for guests. So if you're passionate about DEI and would like to share your unique insights, experiences, or success stories, I want to hear from you. If you're a fellow podcaster who's passionate about DEI, let's swap the mic and amplify each other's voices. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out to me at Andrea@Diversifuse.com and I'll send you the link to our guest interest form. Hope to hear from you soon. Remember, stay Diversifused. Now go out there and make a difference. And as always, for more strategies on building inclusive workplaces and communities, check out Diversifuse. We're here to guide you on the DEI journey. Make sure to visit our website at Diversifuse.com and follow us on social media for the latest happenings, blog posts, tips, and events.